call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, council members CO, Dillon, Gearbaugh, McClellan, Mitchell, and Mayor Pro Tem Tahar. From city staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, Deputy Treasurer McDonough, and DPW Director Fordyce. The rest of you who are in the audience this evening, if you'd be so kind to sign in the back to my left, we would appreciate it. Before I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted, I was thinking about something this weekend, and I'd like to offer it to the group as a suggestion. At our council work meetings, we have one public comment period at the end of each meeting, which is not necessarily compatible, nor does it mirror what we do on just about every other public board, commission, or committee here at the City of Saline. In fact, at planning, at parks, at environmental, etc., the public comment period is at the beginning, allowing someone to address a question or concern that hopefully is dealt with during the deliberation discussion portion of the meeting. And I actually find the way we have it now is sort of counterintuitive. We're usually racing for time, and we're not able to address the concerns of the people that we represent. So my proposal or my recommendation is that we flip it from now on, moving forward, and that the public comment period at council work meetings comes at the beginning of the meeting, the same way it does for regular council meetings, and then of course for every other board and commission. What I would ask, though, this evening, because this agenda was posted, we will maintain the public comment period at the end of the meeting, so we will offer 2 to those who wish to speak. Is there any objection to that moving forward? Excuse me? No? Okay. Very good. Then at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted. Moved by Dillon, seconded by McClellan. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. So again, we will have 2 public comment periods this evening. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? If there are no citizen comments, then we'll proceed to the one discussion item of the evening, which is the 2018 budget. I'm going to turn it over to staff in just a moment to give a brief presentation and then to address any questions, concerns that the group has. I'm hoping that we can develop a consensus on the general operating budget for the next fiscal year by the end of tonight's meeting. We are unable currently to schedule this as a item on a work meeting agenda because we have agenda items for our next regular meeting, but we could add it as a discussion item at the end of our next regular meeting if council needs to continue its deliberation and debate. The other thing that I'm going to look for consensus on is an item that Ms. McDonough addressed at our last meeting, which is how do we move forward on utility rates for water and sewer. You'll recall just last week she discussed the matter, addressed a number of questions. There is a formal recommendation for staff, which Ms. McDonough, maybe when the floor is given to you in just a few moments, maybe you can go over those just one more time so everyone's crystal clear on what staff is proposing. So again, I'm looking for consensus on 2 items this evening. We can be here as long as you want. Hopefully we're not here for hours and hours, but we have no regular meeting to get to, so we'll have ample time to address questions and concerns that you may have. Unless there's anything for me, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager. And again, reminder, we are recording this, so be sure to speak into the microphone.
Thank you, Mayor. So I believe we accomplished, staff accomplished what you all had requested. One was going back and finding additional $10,000 for a total of $30,000 for support for Main Street. So we've done that. We've also, in addition to that, you'll see, because as you'll see in the 5-year projection, we're actually fiscal year 18 proposed about 5,800, a little over 5,800 to the good. But we did that by, you may recall, we discussed about utilizing more TIFA dollars for some of the things that we've done historically with general fund dollars. So trying to be better stewards of the TIFA dollars and utilize them in a better way, so then we can we want to protect that general fund, right, as best we can to be able to utilize it for a number of projects and the support that and the services that it provides. let's see, we also provided you with, you'd asked about the training, conference and training, so we happy to talk to that. And then also talking about the tablets. And so what we would suggest, that we would actually purchase those this year. And what we would purchase, you may recall, the initial, this was for 207 Monroe, Fairdean condominiums, originally had the quote we had to relocate the electric utility was just under 67,000, came in a little over 44, which means that we will be receiving a check for a little over $21,000. That was because it came out of the, if you may recall, it came out of the sale proceeds. So since they were able to negotiate a lesser amount, that means that there's that much more money coming back to the city. And so we would recommend utilizing a portion of those proceeds to purchase the tablets for city council, if you wanted to continue on with that. Certainly, I mean, as far as just ordering them and getting them here doesn't take a long time at all. But obviously, then, as we've talked about in the past, about having policies and procedures in place before going online with that.
And actually, if I
Yes,
may,
please.
that's one of the items. If there is consensus to move forward with the acquisition of tablets for council members, an appropriate policy to complement those tablets will be discussed when legal counsel is in attendance at our next council work meeting a week from this evening.
All right.
Sorry, stealing your thunder.
Not at all, thank you. I'm trying to think.
So that's another item that I want to try and develop consensus on, is whether we're still in agreement to move forward and purchase tablets or
Sure.
laptops, some device for council members to use.
And so, having said that, did I miss anything?
No, we found the magic number to give $10,000 more to Saline Main Street. We had originally in the budget $5,000 for arts and culture for a project that was going to be happening uptown. And with that, we can use TIFA dollars so that we already had the expense in the budget, so we gained $5,000 revenue in TIFA. We also had talked about like the banner installation and tear down, and then the decorations and the work that DPW does. The labor was already in the budget, but TIFA can also pay for some of that, so we brought in more revenue that way, and we got rid of the ice rink. We kind of
Yes, yeah.
aren't going to pursue that project. So that gave us the extra money, and that's where we stand now. So there's an additional line added to the general fund budget on page, towards the end. Contributions to transfers out on page 25, 26, it's next to the last page. The money's still going to EDC, but to show transparency, we added the actual expenditure line for the Saline Main Street amount separate. So we show that we have $30,000 going to Saline Main Street on top of the $21,500 going to EDC for their operating budget.
24.
Page
It's
20,
it's
25.
It's on 25.
It's on 25.
24, Joanne.
24.
25 is the last page.
Oh,
Well, no,
okay.
second
Someone
one.
has something different.
You're
Okay.
saying transfer components, right?
Okay. Yes, okay, I've got it on page 25 of mine. I think they want a copy. Okay, well, so 24 on your page, might be 25 on someone else's page. So we showed the two pieces. In the prior budgets, it was a contribution to ETC, it was 41.5.
Yeah.
We increased the 10,000 to 51.5, but for transparency, we created the second expenditure line for Saline Main Street.
So, the other question I would throw out there for consideration is multi-year as we talked a little bit about that last week, that, and then I still would recommend that we do a multi-year. You know, we're finishing up the 5th year of a 5-year agreement. So then the question becomes, you know, how many years do we go? 3 year, I would say at least 3, but 3 to 5 years, and then the question, and I don't have an answer currently, but you know, what is you know, when we did the first 5-year, we had graduated, and so do we maintain it 30? Do we go go less, go more?
Let me before, I think that's, thank you, just broke my own rule, didn't I? I think that's an excellent question. And before and I do favor some sort of multi-year agreement. Before I work my way around the table on that particular point, we do have Riley and Jill and Rebecca from Saline Main Street with us. Do you care to make any comment at this time or to speak to that issue directly? And I would note, we hope that you enjoyed your conference in Pittsburgh, but Karen and Rebecca did an excellent job carrying water for you all. So, you know.
Karen wasn't in New Zealand and made her come back. Sorry, probably Sarah Calder. Main Street at our
Grab the
conversations
microphone.
at our board meetings thought that a 5-year, you know, $30,000 a year at 5 years would probably be fine. Or if you wanted to go a shorter time, it's just, you know, if you go a shorter time, we'll come back to the negotiating table again earlier, but we were fine with the 5-year commitment.
Well, let me start, and then I'm going to move to you, Councilwoman Mitchell, and I'll end with Ms. McClellan. Obviously, I spoke, and hopefully I spoke emphatically to this point at our last meeting. I believe that Saline Main Street is critical to the city's success, and that's why I favored an additional $10,000 from what staff had initially recommended. So I favor the $30,000, which is reflected in the current draft of the budget. 5 years, I could live with that. My preference would probably be 3, with $30,000 each year. And for this group and or the future council and mayor to reconsider the proposal at the end of 3 years. Obviously, my point is, and this point was made by Karen and I believe also by Rebecca at our last meeting, that some level of support is necessary, and I think will always need to be there for Saline Main Street if it's to remain viable and relevant. Karen was pretty direct that it's not going to be a self-sustaining organization. It does great work. We hope that it will continue to do great work and even better things, but it will always need some level of support from the city. Okay. Ms. Mitchell, can I have you grab the microphone from Mr. Gearbaugh? And I think there's consensus on the 30,000 contribution, so we don't have to speak to that directly, but are you in favor of a multi-year agreement? And if so, maintaining the 30,000? What are your thoughts on that?
I was not prepared to discuss a multi-year. I don't know that I have an opinion right now, so I will bend to my council members' recommendations on that. I do have a question, and it might not be appropriate at this time, but Ms. McDonough, if you took some money out of training, and I just was interested in the different, you haven't taken, because you were able to find it out of Tifa, and, okay, all right, so that was intact. I got it, okay, I just needed to hear it one more time. Thanks.
No, I'm trying to get it bent down. I'm fine with a 3-year contract. I think we should have a multiple-year contract. You can't really make decisions on a 1-year or 2-year basis. And because we have been able to find additional funds in TIFA to help support some of the projects and things uptown, and if we look towards some other aspects, I think that might help achieve your other goals of supporting facade improvements and that, if we can look into those pieces. The only thing is, I do know with the farmers market and we were discussing tonight and such, if those things go into the future and we want to continue to support those, we may have to start looking at other funding. So in 3 years, I think we'll have a better picture of where we actually stand. So I'm good with 3
Mr.
years.
Gearbaugh, just so I'm clear, 3 years, 30,000 each year.
30,000 each year, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do favor the shorter time period, 3 years, 30,000 a year. although I do it with some trepidation, not knowing what future budgets will bring. But I think we can probably squeak it out.
Okay, very good. Ms. Dillon?
Yes, I agree that it should be a multi-year because you just can't plan accordingly. 3 years would be my max preference. I don't want to go 5 years. And like Mr. CO just said, I do have a little bit of a reservation since, I mean, we were kind of scrounging, looking for dollars this year of what next year is going to bring. And I do have a quick question regarding some of the money, which was, I got a lot of flack about the skating rink going away without making it public and having comment on it. I had no idea there was that many people that really like that skating rink. And so I wasn't sure whether or not making that decision quickly from the table here was appropriate. I don't know that we've done that in the past, at least while I've been on council, so I just wanted to bring that up because there were, like I said, several people that reached out to me directly that were not happy that we just very quickly nixed the skating rink in what they viewed as to give the money to Main Street. That it was sort of, you know, getting rid of an amenity for something else.
Well, let me say this. Obviously, when we have, when council reviews the general operating budget for the subsequent fiscal year, anything that is funded through that budget is fair game and is open to discussion and change or modification. And of course, funding for the rink falls within the general operating budget of the city. I did take a head count at the last meeting. It was unanimous that we would eliminate funding for the ice rink in the upcoming fiscal year. That doesn't prevent the city from spending money and setting up and maintaining an ice rink in subsequent years. But it was just a head count, and nothing is official until this budget is adopted. I also received some inquiries and questions regarding that issue and posted on Facebook and encouraged people to attend this meeting. It's apparent that no one is in attendance who would like to speak to this issue. Obviously, they're welcome to attend any subsequent public meeting and speak to this issue. I appreciate the feedback, but we are, what I would say to people who have concerns is that we are operating and living in a world with finite resources. It was it's the determination of council, at least currently, to eliminate those funds and to allocate them elsewhere. So.
No, just to clarify, I was in support, and I still am, of discontinuing the rink at this time. Like I said, I'm just passing along information, and because, like I said, we had not made a decision like that in the past of something that was an amenity as far as people are concerned. They don't look at the budget as things that impact them directly. So, okay, so getting back on topic, yes, I will support 3 years at $30,000.
Good. Mr. Har?
Yes. Also, 3 years at 30,000, I think, it's important for planning purposes. I wouldn't, like everyone else, want to go longer than that just because of the uncertainties of how municipal finance is going to work in this country, in this state, in the next 3 years. So, and I also just want to say about the ice rink that the concern was raised because of the investment of staff time in an amenity that wasn't able to be used. There was no thought when I originally raised this question about the money being transferred to that there was actually a line item in the budget that would be transferred elsewhere. It was about staff time, better use of staff time. So just to get that out on the table.
Question for Jill is how would a 3-year budget or commitment affect you because your calendar year is different than ours? That-
We've always dealt with that, so it's not, it shouldn't affect anything.
Okay.
We've always dealt with the different fiscal years, so we have a mechanism to account for the
Okay,
differences.
okay. So yeah, I'm in favor, 3 years, 30,000.
Think you have consensus on that? Okay, thank you. Ms. McDonough, anything else you'd like to add about the general operating budget for the subsequent fiscal year?
No, but currently the department heads are looking at the budget and tweaking it. We've got an additional $1,200 coming back into the budget, very safe, Mr. Fordyce. So, yeah, I mean, pick it up little by little, but it basically is going to stay pretty much the way it is unless something, the land sales come through and we can actually book it, but otherwise.
Well, let's start with questions then for the general operating budget, and then we'll transition when we're done to hopefully a brief conversation on the issue of tablets or laptops for council members, and then we'll end with utility rates, water and sewer. I always seem to start directly to my right or left, so I'm going to let you off the hook, Ms. McClellan. We'll get to you. Ms. Tahar, would you mind starting, and then we'll actually end with Ms. McClellan.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I was writing notes about something else.
Any questions, and you may not have any. Any questions for Ms. McDonough or for staff about the general operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year?
Yes, I do actually have one, and it has to do with moving the funding of arts and culture projects fully into TIFA money. So by doing so, that means that, if I'm understanding correctly, that arts and culture, the kinds of things arts and culture can do with its money will be restricted to projects, specific projects within the TIFA district
Yes,
next year. Okay.
Okay. And I won't say
That's-
page number, but in the arts and culture, we have added a line.
Right, I saw that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's footnote number 3, I got it. But, okay, just wanted to make sure we understood. Okay, thank
So
you.
if anything changes, if it's not, that the project isn't going to happen uptown or it doesn't fall within
Right.
TIFA, then we just amend it, the revenue would go away,
Okay,
and we would just move it to another expense line.
okay, thank you very much.
Joanne, remember to speak in the microphone if you would. Thank you. Ms. Dillon?
Okay, so just so that I'm kind of working off the same thing, what has changed from the new one from my old one? Because I feel like sometimes I'm not looking at the right thing, and that's why. So what has changed in here?
The ice rink liner,
Right,
$4,000 expense
Mhm.
is gone.
okay.
A total of 10,000 TIFA dollars, 5,000 for arts and culture, and 5,000 for labor reimbursement for taking the banners down, up and down, and the decorations.
Okay,
And that's it so far, basically. So 14,000 came in,
came in.
extra revenue.
Okay,
And then 10 went out
right,
as a contribution to EDC
Okay.
for Saline Main Street.
okay,
So actually, the ice rink didn't go to Saline Main Street.
right,
The
okay.
TIFA dollars did.
And just like I said, to clarify, I think that was sort of how it was put out to the public, was we were.
Well, yeah, we were looking
and it just
for,
sort of-
right, we were just looking to
So,
crunch
just-
some more
yep,
numbers to
that's
get the
fine.
extra.
I do have a couple questions. Um, One is, in the future, it would be really handy dandy if like, and I don't need full descriptions, but like, who qualifies under like salaries? Like, who are these people? Just so we kind of know who's getting paid out of where? Because it's hard to gauge. It's like, well, how come they don't have overtime? Are they all salaried?
For most
Is everybody salaried and stuff? I guess I was just,
Assessing, you would have, Catherine Skull and then her assistant,
right,
they would have overtime probably during, the
right.
board of review time, Todd
Mhm.
and Eleanor are the only ones in theirs, so
Right,
overtime probably.
Right.
It's
Right.
usually comp time or something.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
But, yeah, there should be
police come
an
out
org
of
chart.
police. Of course, there's overtime, but those line items are
Right.
spelled out. DPW, DPW is a little bit because you have all these, the different cost centers, but anything.
For funds, too.
different-
Right.
Right, in different funds.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing, like, sometimes those are the things that it's really just sort of hard to figure out what it is that we're talking about. So actually, a bunch of my questions stem from police. And trying to figure out, there's a couple of line items, like overtime, that is currently showing at 27,000 for FY17, and then it jumps to 60. I don't understand the sequence of numbers, how it went from 57 to 27, up to 28, to 43, to 6. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what happened in 17 that it's only 27, and why are we jumping it so much?
That was just an error. 17's original budget, the 27 was incorrect. It should have been not 60, but up to like the 50,000 that we're making it. 45,000 is what it should have been.
Okay, so we're paying out 60,000 in overtime. Don't we have a full staff, or is it?
We do. Chief, you want to come up here? Well, we do, but if you look at, again, if you look at the past, the past few years,
But wasn't that because we were short of people that we had? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because that seems like it's like a whole other person that we're paying in overtime.
Okay. I didn't know if that was a question or what, or if I should respond. We certainly have overtime when an officer gets a late call, so certainly that doesn't matter whether you're at full staff or not, that overtime's always going to be there. Court time is always going to be there for an officer when he goes to court, and there's minimums that are paid by their contract, so that's going to always be there. And so I guess one of the downfalls with being fully staffed is there's more people to work overtime as well. They're going to get late calls, they're going to be available for late calls, and therefore there's going to be overtime for them as well. So it doesn't matter whether you have 10 employees or 15 employees, but when you jump up to 15 employees, that means there's 15 opportunities rather than 10 opportunities if it occurs at the end of your shift. And then there's also 15 employees that are taking vacation and/or comp time and/or personal time that then, if there's not a body to fill, has to be filled with overtime. So the opportunities for overtime actually go up the more people that you have.
Okay.
the key to that is opportunities.
Right. We try to minimize it as best as possible. And by this creation of this overlap shift is what we call it, we actually can shift people around to cover so it doesn't cost overtime, but it doesn't always work. But we try to do that as best as we can.
Okay. Like I said, it was just a huge jump from what was shown in 17, so I understand that. Then on trainings, once again, it's just sort of where I see sort of the numbers jump. It goes from 2,100 to 35 to 8 to now to 10,000 for conference training. And then there's other line items, so it seems like there's an awful lot of training.
Well, we actually have 3 different training sources.
Right.
We have conference and training, we have Police 302 Act, and Police Dispatcher 32 Act. And depending on what your classification is, will depend on where that money comes out of which line item. As an example, one of the ones that hasn't hit the budget yet, because the bill hasn't come yet, we just paid out $4,500 to make sure that all of the people who are currently certified as dispatchers are going to be trained for the next 2 years. If you recall back maybe 2 years ago when we discussed this whole dispatch thing and the costs associated with it, those people have to have at least 24 hours of training every 2 years to maintain their dispatch certification.
Okay.
And we just did that. And so what I've done is put that in there, so next year, we're going to get ahead of the curve rather than be behind the curve. We're going to get them trained early as opposed to late. We're doing it at the end this time. We're going to do it at the beginning. So our people will actually be trained until 2019. They won't have to have continuing education until after 2019.
Okay. Because that's what I was trying to figure out, like the line item, it's like, you've actually had $330 this year, but you're looking for 5,000 for next year. So, but if you're saying that there's a big bill.
It has not hit yet, yes.
Then,
Yeah.
okay, then I understand that part.
Okay.
And then I still don't quite understand the crossing, the school officer.
Okay.
75% of the time would be designated to the schools. Is that in a per week, per year situation? Like, do we get him 25% of the week out of 40 hours per week? Or do we just get him, is his 25% just mean the summer months when there's schools?
Right, it's going to be just the summer months. We will get him for 25% of the year.
Okay,
Right. During the school year, whoever it is will be in the school full-time, 40 hours a week.
okay,
And during the summertime, we would then get that body back. So we get it for about 25% of the time.
And that could help offset the overtime.
That's exactly right.
okay,
They very well could.
okay. That makes a little more sense. I was just trying to figure out because where would you fit somebody?
Right, right.
Part-time. So, okay, I think that's about it for right now. So, thank you.
Mr. Why don't you hang tight, Chief Reddick, in the event that there's some additional questions for you. Mr. Seal, any questions?
I do about the TIFA money. We seem to look at that as a pot of money that sits out there for our use. I understand it's not necessarily. Let me ask this. By virtue of us designating the TIFA money for other projects, and in fact supplanting, I guess I'll use that word, some of the general fund money to be used for other purposes, is there something in the TIFA budget, or is there a budgeted item that would otherwise use TIFA money that is going to go unfunded as a result of using it?
No. They reworked the TIFA agreement a couple years ago, and kind of like made it a little bit more advantageous to use TIFA dollars. And we are now taking full advantage of it.
Okay.
We used to kind of like just pick and choose, but we realized they have the funds in their budget. So we're going to take a stance and start using them
Okay.
to their fullest advantage.
No detrimental effect.
No, nothing's getting shorted out of, the TIFA budget is basically projects.
Okay.
So if there's if a project that falls in the TIFA district, TIFA is well within its rights to fund it.
Thank you.
Mr. Gearbolt?
I think where the question comes up is, what's the opportunity of doing one project versus another project? That's where the trade-off is. If we decide to not do roads versus something else, there's the objective of what are we attaining to do. But if we have the funds in there and we don't use them, we lose them. So
Right.
we might as well do wherever we can, as much as we can. A couple of questions just on more of the other documents that were handed out last time was really the rec center one that I'd asked for the proposal of the projections of it looking into the future years. And as I was concerned, we're going to need to be looking at that a lot closer in the future years. As we were looking at it from the projection, and I know she has.
I don't have the
and I
copy
don't want to
with
get
me, but
into
I
it.
know exactly
I don't want to
what
get
you-
into it too much, but it's projecting, a deficit of significantly starting in 18 and going forward because of some of the debt service and so forth. So my concern is it's eating into the fund balance so that by 22, and assuming that these projections are not overstated and are close, the fund balance will be almost zero in less than 5 years. So again, we have to continue focusing on this, and I'm bringing that up just at this point because since we haven't yet considered what we're going to do with the roof completely, this does bring that concern of how we're going to continue to fund this. So as we look at all these other items that we're talking about, Main Street and some of these other aspects, I think the big fish is the rec center still in the picture. And so I appreciate having this information, but I think this is something that we need to see on a regular basis, semi-annual,
Okay.
just because we need to understand exactly how this is proceeding, because it is such a big ticket. But that's something that I think the manager may have more input on in the future. The other aspect was looking at the cable franchise fees and so forth. As we all know, this has kind of been what I consider a little bit of a cash-heavy aspect because it's been able to fund the activities that occur for the schools. But we also know that cable is becoming less and less an opportunity and more people are looking at using wireless or even going off wire. So I'm not so sure that we want to continue passing on this money at the level that we are, and maybe we want to look at capping it so the schools are aware of it. But also, I would like to see this as becoming more support for some things that are done by the city. This past year, I have not been incredibly satisfied with the activities in terms of what's been actually showing on the cable station. We do know there was an issue with the line and everything, and that's been resolved. Hopefully, there will be. But there are times when stuff is being broadcast without any sound. It's just not really being broadcast frequently. There's just some aspects of it, whether we need to be more pushing back on our cable agreement, or simply we need to reconsider how this operation works. I'm just, at this point, we've not really done much. It's been the same thing for 15 years. It may be time to start rethinking this. So just another item in the budget where we do have funds coming in that potentially could be redirected for other activities within the city, considering that the schools have gotten significant revenue from some other aspects lately. And then the last thing in terms of the laptops, we haven't talked about it yet, but my concern is looking at them, not laptops, but whatever we get, I don't know, I think we need to have cellular activity. I don't think that's necessarily needed because that would cover another ongoing cost. It's more of the idea of being able to have our Wi-Fi and be able to use it here in this building. But I don't want to really get into a big laptop or something like a 17-incher because that's carrying around basically a book. And I do appreciate having some funding that's coming up out of the sale that we can use to support that, because I think the overall net cost of putting those into place will help reduce our overall costs, operating costs. The only other thing with the budget in terms of, and I guess we'll discuss that later, is when we talk about the fees, the water and sewer fees.
Okay. Thank you. The one thing I would note, and I appreciate you bringing up Channel 18, Mr. Gearbaugh. I don't purchase cable through Comcast, so I am not able to view Channel 18 at home. But if people watch Channel 18, and I would extend this invitation to our residents as well, if you watch Channel 18 and per Mr. Gearbaugh's example, there's no sound, or there's a significant issue related to quality, I would encourage people to immediately contact the city manager who sits on the cable commission to notify him of some sort of technical error, because we do want to resolve those. And to Mr. Gearbaugh's point, it's simply not acceptable. We have paid and we continue to pay good money for that service. We'd like to be able to share pertinent and timely information and do it in a quality way, and when that's not being done, again, it's not acceptable, and we'll work expeditiously to resolve that. Ms. Mitchell, questions about the budget?
Nope.
No? Okay. You want to grab the microphone from Ms. Dillon? Last but not least.
Last but not least. Question about the council training budget. Do we have a history of spending on that? I see that there's this kind of minimal.
Yeah, it's very minimal.
Okay, does it do us any good to drop that number down? I guess this is more a question to my colleagues than it is to you probably, but, I know it's important to go to training, and it's important to have some funding there for us to do outside training, but $1,000 a person, and especially if we're not using it, I don't know if there's maybe a way that, some suggested use that we should be doing, or if we should knock the number down to 500 a person, or of some kind of an average based on history of
That would
spending.
be up to you. If you.
I just think that
there's-
might be a way that we
And that's
fund
kind
the
of-
laptop issue too. I'm sure there's online training
Well-
courses and,
I think I'm the one that's used, I've used like $700 this year going to conferences. And, I feel like it was money well spent, because I went to the Frankenmuth one, which was a couple $100 plus lodging. So, to cut it down to 500, we wouldn't be able to go to things.
that's what I'm wondering, though, is that
And
we're
so I
not
would
going
rather
to things,
have it
so.
and not use it than not have it available.
But I'm going to let the city manager comment, and then I'll get you and Mr. Gearbaugh.
Yeah, just real quick if I could. And staff knows this because unfortunately, when times get tight and, one of the first things typically, right, an organization looks at is its training budget and reduce the training budget significantly. And what I advocate for is training is one of the major things that help us stay in front of the curve, if you will. And so to me, it is important to continue at all levels including council. I mean, I think it certainly is. Some folks, and I know some folks have, even at staff level, have done training and have paid it out of their own pocket, for instance. I know some council members have done that over the years too, which is admirable, and that's terrific. However, I think there needs to be. I think certainly $1,000 is reasonable. And in some cases, depending on if there's something significant, there may be, maybe at a request of the city, from a council member to the council, that, hey, here's why I'd like to go to this training, and it's significantly more than what I have, for instance, on my line item. I mean, again, I just would throw out there that I think training is important at all levels.
I would echo that to a comment that Ms. Dillon made in reference to Frankenmuth. What she's referring to, which you may have attended as well, in fact, I think most of us have attended it, is MML's Elected Official Academy, and there are multi-levels. That is an outstanding 2-day, 1.5-day seminar, and they provide overnight accommodations in Frankenmuth, and it rotates from time to time. But it would be my strong, emphatic recommendation that every council member go through that, because I think it's that valuable, and I think it gives you a good grounding, a good perspective, in addition to the networking opportunities and a number of other things. But and that one comes at a cost, as Ms. Dillon mentioned. Mr. Gearbaum.
No, I was just going to say, I think a number of us have over the years benefited from participating in MML conferences and in the training that occurs at those, because you get to meet our cohorts and you understand what's happening in other cities is not so much different than what we're doing, but you also get some different ideas and so forth. But the training that you mentioned, the academy, is really good, because that is a thing, and it's like professional development for us, so that we understand what's happening and so forth. I mean, there's a combination of training versus professional development, and $1,000 in the past used to cover the cost basically to go to the MML conference, plus maybe something else. There used to be a National League of Cities activities and stuff, but we haven't done that in years since the recession. And a lot of the times, I think keeping that in that budget is beneficial for us, that if something should come up that a member does want to attend, then we've got it in there. But you're right, on off years, we should use those funds for something else. We shouldn't be increasing our budget to account for a new expense. And if there's funds there, then we can anticipate it, which I think is kind of how Mr. Campbell is doing it this year in order to pay for some of the things that we're doing, including him in this budget. But other than that, my issue with training is that there's professional development and there's training. So there's two of those. One should have a cap on it, the other one not so much, but you need to be able to make a discern on that, and usually professional development gets pulled back.
Right, and I totally agree. I just was trying to get the history of it, because it looks like for councils, even since Councilmember Peters was around, which has been a while, that it hasn't been utilized away. And I don't know that it's necessarily that we're not training, it's just that maybe it's not coming out of the city's budget, so coming out of pocket, because I know Mr. CEO has been to a few that have been out of pocket. So.
Please.
It's true, is it not, though, that any unused funds go back to the general fund and they're carried over to the next year as part of the seed money for the subsequent year's budget?
Right. Unless council takes specific action to earmark and say to roll it over. Otherwise, it just goes back into the fund balance, if you will, and then for potentially to be used for subsequent budget years.
So my point is, if it's in there and it's not used, it's not wasted.
Right. I think that was it for me.
That was it?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to the upcoming fiscal year budget in its totality? No? Okay, well then let's transition then to an email that has been copied for your benefit. It's dated Monday, April 17th, and it's from Chris Schonk regarding the cost of tablets. And then he also, or the clerk's office also provided you what it costs on a bi-weekly basis to not only print and collate, but also to then distribute the council packets. And so I will open it up for questions or for comments, and of course to see if council is still interested in moving forward with the purchase of some sort of tablet or electronic device. Mr. Gearboss, since you were the one who first brought this up, can I begin with you? I'll work my way around the table and probably end with Councilwoman Mitchell.
Yeah, and actually, I guess I haven't seen it, so let me just look at it tonight.
Yep.
By looking at a cost of $50 per meeting times, how many meetings we have,
24 at a minimum.
right? So you're talking $1,000. But we're not talking about, we don't have the police time in here, do we, of delivering?
Yeah.
That includes the police paper, the ink, and police.
But it doesn't include the staff time to prepare all that.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Putting it all, what does it take to put them all together?
It's not taped together, right?
What does it take you, Amy, Connie, on average? Not Connie.
Every time is different because it depends on each time is different because it depends on what's coming in and how late we're running. So we can start packets early in the day and run what we have, and then as it finishes up. But usually it's about an hour. An hour is a good.
Per meeting.
Per meeting, yep.
Some of that you'd still be doing, correct? Because you have to scan stuff and put it into all the, information, so.
But how many meetings do we actually are having? Don't we have one every other week, so 26?
24.
But what about work meetings and everything else?
Well, they go out with your regular council packet, so it's not that much more.
But there may be more than just 24. I still think this is kind of this number isn't as accurate as what I think it would be in terms of all the work and effort that goes together, put together.
It's hard to really estimate because every time is different.
Right.
Clearly, I think we could all agree, Mr. Gearboss, there's more of a cost than what's enumerated in the memo.
This comes close, but I think the convenience and the ability for us to have documents, because I know even at times when we've done our meetings, we are referring back to budget documents that were handed out at 2 meetings ago, and we don't have them with us, so we can't reference them. If we have the stuff there electronically, we can get it. The idea is to improve our efficiencies and our ability to answer questions and be able to respond. And I think that's the goal, is I want to become more effective that way. I mean, otherwise, I'll bring in my iPad or my phone, but it'd be better because of the idea of freedom of information and everything else, that those documents and everything in that device, if it's foilable, can be foilable. I don't want my personal device foilable.
I have mixed feelings about this. Probably being the eldest person on council, I like to use paper because I like to be able to flip from page to page easily. And some of these spreadsheets get pretty voluminous, and to try to view them on a tablet, they span the page, you got to scroll over, scroll back, scroll over, scroll back. Some of those get a little difficult, at least for me, to be able to make a coherent, logical kind of a use of if it's on a tablet. That said, however, I also recognize we're in the electronic age. Most people, especially my grandchildren, know more about using these things than I do. And I know it's the coming thing to do. Like Mr. Gearboss says, it is much easier to go back and refer to a previous memo if you haven't brought the reams of paper that I now have stacked up in my inbox at home to every meeting. For instance, I didn't bring this specific memo tonight. I do know this, though, having been a data processing manager in the past, that once you go down that trail, it's like being a little bit pregnant. There's no such thing. You're either wholly committed or you're not. So you've got to put it in the budget to replace them every 4 or 5 years. You have to make some provision for maintenance on the things. You have to have some spares in case somebody drops one or there's some failure on one of the devices so that people can continue to have the information they need. So I have mixed feelings. I can go either way.
And let me say this, that if the consensus is to acquire some sort of electronic device and a council member still would like some sort of material printed, I don't think there would be any objection. There'd be no problem with that. If you, for instance, if you wanted Ms. McDonough to print off draft 4 of the budget, because you prefer to have a paper copy and make notes and do whatever it is you do with it, that would be acceptable.
Very good. Okay. So I'm ambivalent, really. I can see pros and cons on
Okay.
both sides of the fence.
Ms. Dillon?
So here's my question. What exactly is the purpose of the laptops for us? Are we using them as a source to refer to data? Or are we generating things? My point being, do we need a $900 Surface if we're not using all of those programs on it? I mean, can we get a $200 Chromebook? I mean, are we looking for a device that can access the internet to bring up our documents? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what its purpose is, because I've already got a big phone and an iPad and my MacBook. I'm not sure how much more crap I want to be carrying around. And so I sort of envision these as sitting at the dais when we were here. This is what we're using. I mean, I just sort of see the way Ann Arbor has their, their machines set up at their dais that they're using, and they're seeing all their documents that way. Because truthfully, I'm not sure, once again, I'm not going to be putting anything on this device. I would have my city email maybe coming onto it, but other than that, it's going to be documents. I don't know what we would want to have on them if they're FOIAble. So I guess that's my question, is what exactly do we want this device to do for us?
My understanding is, and I actually share some of your concerns, my understanding is it would be more for the storage of documents. I could see council members potentially sending city-related emails and messages.
Right.
In your capacity as chair of the Substance Abuse Task Force, I could easily see, if it was your preference, doing work related to the task force on that tablet or device. I can tell you, and I've already expressed this to the city manager, similar to Mr. CEO, I have a certain amount of ambivalence. I'm not going to take any tablet or device. I don't want another piece of technology that I have to be responsible for. I have a desktop in my office at City Hall. That plus my phone plus my personal iPad are more than sufficient. If the clerk wants to just email the entire packet to me on Thursday, that's fine. I'll review it and I'll just have a printed off agenda at each meeting. I don't want another device. But if other council members want them and they think that it would be helpful,
For me, what I would think, what I see it as being helpful is what we keep referring back to, is that we're constantly referring back to things. And being able to quickly search the master plan, or to go back and look at some other document from a previous meeting. That's what I really, in real time, because it looks terrible when we're sitting up there and people start taking out their phones because you're like, are you scrolling Facebook? What are you doing up there, when you're actually trying to find a map of People's Park? So, I mean, I think that's sort of what I envisioned it. So I just want to make sure we're all sort of on the same page about what we want these devices to be for. I mean, like I said, in my opinion, I don't need a $900 machine. Because I just don't see that I'm going to be sitting here creating things that I need, that I need Excel for, or I need pages from a Mac machine, or whatever. I just don't see that. I'm not really, and maybe that's just how I am, and so I'm just trying to figure out. And I do agree with Mr. CEO, there are certain documents that I like having hard copies of. The budget is definitely one of them. It's hard enough to read. I always have to have another sheet of paper so I can make sure I'm looking across the same line. But at the same time, it's nice to be able to have the search feature, where if you wanted to quickly look up something, you could find it. Because I'm not going to carry my budgets. I mean, when we're talking budgets, yeah, that's great, but I'm not going to carry all this stuff to every meeting. So that's sort of where I am. I'd like to just sort of know what everybody else is thinking about devices, of what they think its purpose would be.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I've thought about that too. And ideally, for me, if I had this device, I would have everything, I would like to have a device that would have everything related to my work for the city on one device. So that it's all in one place instead of sometimes in my personal email account, sometimes in my city email account, sometimes on my laptop, sometimes here, there, and everywhere. So that would be one advantage. The question I have, the question I have is how searchable will the documents be? Right now, you just have to remember when things happened and able to, in order to be able to go back and find, unless you've indexed your council packets, which I have not, to go back and find something on a previous topic in a previous council packet is impossible. And I had really hoped that when we had electronic packets that we could access, that those would be searchable, but they're not. So if we get devices and we have everything on our devices, I would really, really like them to be set up so that they could be searchable. In our work on, in my work on the Code Review Task Force, having an electronic version of the city code that is searchable pretty well, what is a great advantage over trying to work through the index and the documents. So searchability for me would be a key advantage if we could have it.
Ms. McClellan?
Yeah, I agree with some of the comments that have been made already, but question for, I guess this would be for Chris, who's not here, but his extra time, obviously he has to manage the equipment, he's got to deal with repairs. I see he puts that he recommended the Surface Pro because of its tracking and management, its durability, and then its interface. And so I'm questioning whether we're trading savings of time for Terry and Amy for Chris's time. So I feel like that may just be kind of a wash. The pros that I see, again, I think the data storage is huge. The stacks and stacks of paper that are at my house that if I wanted to find some information would take me hours and hours and hours, and the space alone. Again, having some place for all of that information to be, I think is beneficial. Whether or not it comes at a cost of a Surface Pro or if it can be done on something smaller or cheaper, I would be in favor of that. But I kind of defer to Chris's recommendations on that because I think he knows what we're looking to use it for and knows kind of the durability, the tracking and management opportunities that some of the other devices may not have. And then, again, I think, Ms. Terhar, your comment about it being searchable, agendas and documents being searchable is fantastic. I think that would be. But again, that would take time for Chris, I would assume, him to set all that up. And I don't even know it would probably be some situation of going forward, things would be searchable, not necessarily things from the past.
Sure.
I have an index for what happens for council meetings, so so when you get beginning of the year, every item has 17-01, 1702, and I have a list of those so that they're easily findable, and I have them in an Excel spreadsheet. So you can hit Control F and put in budget, and every time budget comes up, it will push it down. I don't forward that to you because I don't know how often you look for them. But our minutes on demand are very searchable, so you wouldn't have to keep everything on yours. You would be able to go to minutes on demand, and you would know that you were looking for 17-56, and you would be able to find that. That is something that I would be happy to share with you, and I could update after each meeting so that you would be able to find items quicker. So I understand what you're doing, but in a way, I'm already doing some of this stuff that would help you, but you don't have the equipment, so I haven't been forwarding it on to you. So it's not reinventing the wheel. I have it started.
Gotcha. Anything else, Ms. McClellan?
I don't think so. I think that's great to know that it wouldn't be a whole lot of extra work to
Okay.
get this up and rolling. But I see Mr. Co's point too of having some actual papers or some things, but I think probably going to save time and money
Okay.
to have them.
Ms. McClellan, you want to grab the microphone from Mr. Gearbar, Mr. CO?
Ms. Mitchell?
What did I call?
So
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
I understand fatigue. So I envision using this much the way, I got very used to using electronic documents at the university. And, if I need to create a note, then I just create an electronic note. And my electronic notes, I can click and find them. For me, this is so much easier and so much more portable than I find the paper truly, truly cumbersome. I think as far as the cost of the tablet, I think the security, I suspect, I don't know, but I think some of the security things require a more robust machine than a $200 tablet. And, I'm a super fan of really cheap computers, and my children all use them, but I trust that Chris has his reasons, and nothing that I've seen from him would ever let me think that he would say, hey, let's have this super de-duper most amazing tablet ever for city. I think he's giving us what we need, and we just don't have all the information, but there's a really good reason why he recommended that. I trust the professional. So for me, I'm really hoping we can use something like this.
Okay. Mr. Gearbar, you have a final thought?
Chris mentioned, the Surface Pro, whatever. What's the size of that compared to the 12.9? I mean, is that a full-size sheet of paper?
Is that machine?
It's a Surface Pro.
So it's basically a laptop when you include the
Yeah.
keyboard with it.
Okay.
And Chris will be here.
Next Monday.
The only thing that I'm looking at the Surface Pro versus the iPad is that usually the iPads don't have as much potential ability to be hacked. I don't know what operating system runs on that.
Right. Well, we don't have any Apple products in
We have phones.
phones, okay.
As far as machines, we don't have any.
Yeah, it's all PC.
That would be my only question in terms of the potential security issues.
Let's do this. Obviously, we could continue this discussion for quite some time. I'm not sure how meaningful it would be without the attorney present or without our IT director, both of whom will be here next Monday to discuss a policy and to address any technical questions that you may have. However, from what I'm hearing, there seems to be broad consensus to move forward. So we'll keep this line item in place, at least for the time being. Again, I'll state I'm good with what I've got. But I think council would, it's sounding like council would benefit from having some sort of electronic device to help them manage and store data. So I think that's that. Ms. McDonough, do you want to comment again briefly on what staff's recommendation is regarding utility rates?
Okay, I just want clarification on how you wanted me to proceed with the rates. I presented the rates last week and showed that was under 5%. I thought the impression I get last year during the work session that we wanted to smooth it out and not show any big swings from year to year. So, but then last week, I kind of got the impression that, 5 or 6% was okay. So do you want me to unsmooth a little bit in FY18? Because it did look, FY19 did look ugly. But then again, FY18 last year at this time wasn't pretty either. So
Let's start with, so again, everyone clear on the question that Ms. McDonough's proposing, and everyone's clear on what her recommendation was that she discussed a week ago, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Then let's start with Mr. Gearbaugh. We'll end again with Ms. Mitchell. I'm sorry, we're saving the best for last each time. If you have any questions for Joanne, please ask them, but again, I'm looking for consensus on that point.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we didn't do anything less than 5%. I think you had it slightly down, but if we can tweak it a little bit more so it doesn't have a big blurb in 3 years.
right,
that's
okay, okay.
I think changing that smoothing is we need to be more realistic on our rates
Okay,
and not
right.
5% interest.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Mr. Seal?
I agree. I think 5% this year, and then whatever that,
And we're talking 5% like on a residential
right, yes.
increase.
Yes.
Because it's a little bit higher on an industrial because their our RTS is,
Yep.
is
And
a
to be
bigger-
clear, we're only jumping from what, 4.4?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So,
Get them all.
Got on this side now.
Being
Grab
stared
that one and give it to Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Dillon, go ahead.
Okay, so like Mr. Zero just said, so we're going to go from 4.4 to a 5.
Right, we'll bring it up closer to a
Right.
5, yes.
Now, will that impact, or are we keeping this at a 5.3?
No,
So that'll
it
jump
will
too?
all jump as
It'll
well,
all jump,
yes.
okay. And so then, what would happen in 18?
I played with the numbers in 19.
In
It would
19,
be
I'm
FY
sorry.
19, but it would be the 20,
I'm sorry.
2018.
So, yeah.
It gets better.
It gets better than
Because, right, I'm moving
8.4.
some of the expenses for FY 19, I'm kind of like, 18, I'm kind of pushing out a couple of years, so I'll put some of it back into 18, which will minimize 19 to 20.
Mhm.
So it won't be as a drastic swing
Okay,
as it looks on that
Okay.
report there, right.
okay. Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out for people budgeting, what I want is that, so then, what is your guesstimate for 19 then? Because right now, we're at, what, 8.4?
Yeah, I think it
So-
got down to like the low 7s.
Okay, so it's
When I
still going to
moved-
be another bump up.
Yes,
But,
yes,
okay.
because we've got the
Okay. I hope we were
MDOT
smoothing
project
a little bit more.
we're trying to capture that project
Right.
over 4 years. So
Yep.
that'll be in there until like 2020, so,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
And then on top of it, the new projects that come on board.
So, Ms. Dillon, you're in agreement with Mr. Seo, Mr.
Yes,
Gearbox?
yes, at 5%, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I agree.
Good.
I agree.
Ms. Mitchell?
5%.
Okay, how about another question?
Okay.
And this came up, and it was just a suggestion. The rates are normally go into effect on June 1st. And for a quarterly bill, you don't see those rates until September. You capture June, July, and August on your September bill. So we have our increases, but we also have sprinkler usage and people watering their lawns. So when they get that first bill, a lot of times, it's almost double. So
Right.
they think that their rates have doubled.
Right.
And then, because they don't realize, by the time they get the bill in September, they've stopped watering, and it's not fresh in their minds.
So you're saying-
Somebody had suggested maybe pushing it out 3 months and having the rate impact the December invoices, which would be August. I really don't know. I mean, it would be probably a quarter, of the cost. We would still,
We need to
We-
continue on going forward, right? To make that-
right, we would just lose that 3-month, that increase for 3 months. But then it would continue for a full year.
Let me start the consensus, because actually I might be a bit of an outlier on the overall issue, because I favor a more nominal increase, but the majority has spoken. I think on this issue specifically, one, I appreciate you bringing it up, and I would be amenable to delaying it one water bill.
Right, okay.
I think that's reasonable and appropriate, considering some of the pressures that our residents are under.
Yeah, it's just that the timing, because of the summer months.
Right.
And all of a
So
sudden, that's,
they would pay it the next year.
right, they'd be catching up.
They'd be immune this
3
next
years after that,
billing
so,
cycle.
Right.
Then going forward, we would continue on, and the increase would be pushed back to that same, to the September peak.
Correct.
So, for 1 quarter. So it would be, again, they're gonna be paying that additional 5% on their sprinkling, but not this summer, it would be
Next summer, right.
Ms. Mitchell, how do you feel about this?
I just think we should start. And I think that if people are watering their lawns, they need to be careful about it. I say that because I am a gardener and I water, but if we're concerned about budget and how we're going to finance things and people are using more water, they have to pay more. But I might be a minority. I have a lot of acceptance around that.
Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Because then we're really not raising a 5% rate.
Right. We're pushing it down the road.
I mean,
a
if you
little
wanted
bit,
to
so.
postpone it, but tweak it to be 5.15 or 5.25.
Right, I mean, I would take a look at the numbers
That
and
would
see
be
what the
more-
increase would be in September.
That would be more
To
agreeable
add
for me.
more of the months.
Because I don't want us to get behind. I want us to catch up. And
Right,
that's-
right.
The more we shift that into the future, and we've done that because of the way we're approaching with
Right.
all the fees for all the
Right.
bookings and everything, we're getting so much stretched out. we're not keeping up with inflation either.
Right, but at that time, your 5.5 increase isn't going to be that high amount because their
You didn't
water
consume
hasn't
as much
doubled.
water.
Their water usage
Yeah.
hasn't doubled.
At
So they
least
won't
for-
see it,
at
they'll
least
just
for
see
people that love water.
those few dollars, so, yeah.
Mr. Seal?
I agree with Mr. Gearba. If we do delay it, we need to bump it up another 1/4% or whatever the law says. Because we do not want to get behind. I've always resented these politicians who kick the can down the road for somebody else.
Ms. Dillon?
Okay, so I agree with Ms. Mitchell. I think if we're going to do it, we just do it. But that being said, do we have ample time to warn people of this increase? Because what I don't want to do is slap them in September and be like, oh, by the way, welcome. We
No,
had
well,
an
they-
increase.
the
So I just
increase-
want to make sure that they're going to realize
Right. Well,
before they start water.
They get an increase, they get a notification when it goes into effect June 1st. It's in the FYI for their June bill, which does not have the increase, that, to expect it in September. So we would do that in August, that in December's bill, you're going to have this increase. I mean, they'll get the same notification, the same time frame of the notification. It's just not going to happen in June 1st, it's going to happen in September.
We're actually giving you more forewarning because we'd only be giving them 2 weeks warning if we raise it June 1st.
Well, we don't, because it's not going to be in their bill until September. They get
But we want
notified.
them to, I guess what I want to do is make sure that there would be ample public notice beyond the FYI, because I don't think that people necessarily.
Well, part of the issue.
That's all we've ever done, but yeah.
I mean, we could do something on the web, we could do something on Facebook.
Right,
we
and
could
that's
do-
fine. If
Right,
we're
but I'm just
proactive
saying,
about
like,
it, I
I-
think we should just do it.
Well, my-
Well, I don't believe we've ever done anything more than the FYI.
Well, no, my point is, we could communicate proactively till we're blue in the
Okay.
face, and we're gonna miss.
Oh,
That's-
right,
that's
right,
A certain
fine.
demographic.
That's fine, but as long as we make an effort beyond the FYI,
FYI.
I think.
Oh, that's fine, yeah, with Facebook and everything.
Thank you.
I disagree about making an extra effort beyond our usual communication efforts, because I truly believe, well, okay, at my worst moments, I believe that 90% of our citizens are not paying attention. And so no matter what we do, they won't get the word. And they'll just be surprised by the bill, or not surprised by the bill. And I agree with Ms. Mitchell. Perhaps I shouldn't speak about this because I don't water my lawn. But I think we should either do it at the fiscal year, or it should be a higher raise, a higher increase if we're pushing it back, because
Yeah, I would have
like,
to
as
rework
Mr.
the
Seo said, kicking the can down the road is not the right thing to do.
How much money are we talking?
Truthfully, I don't know.
Or on average?
Actually,
Like, I know
yeah.
you talked about it at the last meeting about how the
Oh, it
increase of
was-
4.4 was what, like
What
$20?
is it?
$9.73. So-
For someone who uses 18 units, which, is a national
That's
average.
average,
I think,
okay.
based on ours, including the periods where, in the summer months where they.
That
where they
includes the
water.
watering lawns and
The
stuff?
city usually is about 14, anywhere from 13 to 14 units. So it'll be less than the $9.73, somewhere between the $6 and $9.
Okay, so we're talking an increase of
To Starbucks.
2 lattes. Okay, so I would just say, let's just get it over with and do it. I mean, and I think if we can express that trend, you can put that on Twitter, that it's just, the cost of 2 coffees.
I mean,
I know that's not for everybody, so I don't want to be flip about it, but,
right. And
know,
it's
some
nothing
people
new.
it
It's
is, it
always-
is a
that's
big
always
deal,
been the
but-
case. And
but as long as we're communicating that and that we're not kicking the can down the road, because it's going to have to be paid for at some point.
yes.
We're trying to smooth it as best we can, but also be responsible and try and get it paid for as quickly as we can as well.
I think you've got consensus then. I think I think enough of us would be inclined to delay it with an increase, but I'm hearing more support for having it take, not immediate effect, but to implement it when we normally would.
Which is my preference.
Okay.
because I'm doing the budget now, to
Yep.
do it in the middle of the audit.
Yep, and we want to make sure that you have the consensus and that there's no ambiguity. So you know how to move forward?
Yep.
Okay, very good. My last question then, as it relates to the general operating budget, is there any additional comments or concerns? Because if not, we're gonna run with this. This is what's going to be considered for adoption in June. Okay, Mr. CO?
Just again, thank you to all the staff for the hard work and for getting it all put together in a manner that appears reasonable and that it's balanced.
Yep. I would echo that and say, as I've said on numerous occasions, that the budget is a reflection of our values and our priorities, and I think we invest critically in the areas that have the most impact on our citizens' quality of life. And this is a pretty significant paradigm shift from where I was when I was first elected in 2009, where we were dealing with hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in the red. So for the first draft, or the second draft to be balanced is a sea change from where we were 7, 8 years ago. So again, thank you to staff for their hard work and all their efforts. I would make this comment: if you do have questions and concerns, please direct them to the city's manager's office as soon as possible. Do not wait until an upcoming council meeting. Pick up the phone, email him whenever you have a question and concern, okay? Very good. Okay, my friends, if there is nothing further, we come to the, you have a comment? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I meant to mention this at the beginning of the meeting, but I apologize. Just an update on the emergency siren. It is back up and running, and so they were able to find the parts and pieces, and so as I've mentioned, it is obviously it's an older unit, and parts are difficult to come by, but they were able to our longtime repair folks that keep it going. Had a pallet of these parts and pieces, and they apparently had misplaced the pallet, and they found it. So they actually tested it. I believe they tested it twice on Saturday, and so we're very thankful for that. I just want to let you all know that. Thank you.
We come now to citizen comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments? There are no citizen comments, then the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:17 p.m. Moved by McClellan, seconded by CO. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. This meeting is adjourned.